Nora West was born on March 14, 2009, in the small town of Fairview, Ohio. She came into the world on a sunny spring day, and her mother, Amy, always recalled that the first time she looked into Nora's eyes, she saw something special, a calm determination and an unusual awareness for a newborn. Nora grew up in a typical middle-class American family. Her father, Tom West, worked as a programmer and spent much of his time on the computer, while her mother cared for the children and worked part-time as an English tutor. Their marriage started with great love, but 3 years after Nora was born, things began to change. Tom frequently traveled for work, and Amy carried the full burden of the household. In 2012, when Nora's younger sister, Sarah, was born, the tension between the couple reached its peak. Just a few months later, Tom and Amy officially divorced. After the divorce, Amy decided to leave the past behind and start a new life. She chose the quiet town of Kingsville, Ohio, located about 50 miles from their former home. The town was charming, narrow tree-lined streets, cozy homes with spacious porches, small local shops, and an air of peace interrupted only by birdsong. The move to Kingsville. The move was challenging. Amy, with 2 small children, had to start over from scratch. They settled into a modest 2-story house surrounded by a small lawn and a white picket fence. The house was located on a quiet street where almost every home looked like it belonged on a postcard. The neighbors were friendly and supportive. Many helped Amy with the move, bringing homemade baked goods and offering assistance. Nora quickly adapted to the spirit of the town. She loved walking in the local parks and forests, which began just 5 minutes from their home. Her favorite spot was an old oak tree on the edge of the forest. She called it the magic tree and often told Sarah that the tree was protecting their home. Nora's personality and hobbies. From an early age, Nora demonstrated an unusual curiosity. She loved taking things apart to understand how they worked, and by the age of 8, she could assemble simple models or repair broken toys on her own. Her favorite pastime was reading mystery novels and creating her own stories. Her favorite book was The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Nora even kept a small notebook where she recorded observations about the world around her, as if training to become a real detective. Her artistic talents also became apparent early on. At school, Nora participated in theater productions, often landing leading roles. She loved creating her own costumes, and her improvisations often surprised even her teachers. Her friends and family knew that Nora loved being the center of attention, but she always did so with humility and kindness. Among her friends were Lauren and Jen, 2 girls she had bonded closely with since moving to Kingsville. Lauren, a dreamy blonde with big blue eyes, and Jen, an energetic brunette with freckles, were her constant companions in games, walks, and detective investigations. Everyday life in the West family. The West family lived a calm and somewhat predictable life. Mornings began with Amy preparing breakfast while Nora and Sarah helped set the table. After school, the girls did their homework, and in the evenings, they enjoyed watching movies or reading books together as a family. Amy worked hard to create a warm and cozy atmosphere for her daughters, despite the challenges. She supported Nora's interests and was proud of her school achievements. Sometimes they sat together on the porch with cups of cocoa, talking about life. These were the moments Amy cherished the most. Autumn of 2021. The year 2021 was full of significant events. In the fall, Nora celebrated her 12th birthday with her family and close friends. Amy baked a chocolate cake decorated with whipped cream and fresh berries, and her friends gifted Nora a drawing album where she began creating illustrations inspired by her favorite books. That autumn was particularly beautiful. The leaves on the trees gleamed with golden and crimson hues, and the air was cool and fresh. Nora and her friends often walked in the forest, collecting acorns and making up stories about the mysteries hidden there. But amidst these perfect days, the first shadows of unease began to appear. Amy's worries. Amy had always considered Kingsville a safe place, but in recent months, she had started to feel uneasy. She noticed that Nora was spending more time away from home and once heard a neighbor mention a strange man who had been seen near their neighborhood. Although it seemed like a minor detail, combined with the unsettling news reports about teenage abductions she saw on TV, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She decided to install new locks on the house and insisted that Nora always tell her where she was going and with whom. Still, the relaxed atmosphere of Kingsville made her think, nothing like that could happen here. She also began to notice subtle signs. On several occasions, when she stepped out onto the porch at night, she saw the faint glow of headlights flashing in the distance. While she didn't give it much thought, these small incidents fed her growing anxiety. All she could do was hope her fears were unfounded. She had no idea that, within weeks, her family would be at the center of a tragedy that would forever change the lives of everyone in Kingsville. The evening of October 4, 2021, began like any other autumn evening in Kingsville. The air was cool, and the warm orange glow of the setting sun illuminated the quiet streets. Nora was particularly excited. She had convinced her mother to let her two best friends, Lauren and Jen, stay over for a sleepover. It was a weekday, but Amy, seeing how responsible Nora had been with her studies, decided to make an exception. Lauren arrived first, just after dinner. Her father dropped her off, and she brought a bright pink sleeping bag and a bag of popcorn. Shortly after, Jen showed up, carrying a board game she insisted they had to try later. The girls quickly settled in the living room, laughing and chatting as they planned how to spend the night. The start of the sleepover. Amy, though a little tired from work, enjoyed seeing her daughter so happy. She helped the girls set up their sleeping bags in the living room and reminded them not to stay up too late. They promised, though their smiles clearly suggested otherwise. Around 9:30 p.m., Amy kissed her younger daughter, Sarah, goodnight and went to her room. She took her usual sleeping pills, a mild sedative she used to unwind after long and exhausting days. In the living room, the girls were in full swing. They started by watching a comedy movie and then moved on to sharing secrets and gossiping about school. As always, Nora was the leader of the group, coming up with games and ideas to make the night unforgettable. Lauren and Jen loved her energy and her ability to turn any evening into an adventure. They decided to play hide-and-seek inside the house. To make the game more exciting, they turned off almost all the lights, leaving only flashlights for illumination. The house filled with muffled giggles and whispers as they crept around, trying not to give away their hiding spots. The first sign of trouble. Around 10:45 p.m., Jen paused the game. She thought she had heard something, a faint sound, like someone stepping on dry leaves outside the house. Probably just the wind, Nora said, trying to calm her friend. Lauren agreed, but Jen couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. To ease the tension, they decided to move back to the living room, where the warm glow of a nightlight made everything feel less scary. They started playing the board game Jen had brought, laughing and teasing each other about the rules. The noise from earlier seemed insignificant, and soon they forgot about it. A stranger at the window. Around 11:15 p.m., as the game was winding down, Lauren glanced toward the window. Her face suddenly froze. "Nora," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I think there's someone outside." Nora and Jen turned to look. At first, they didn't see anything unusual, just the shadowy outlines of trees and the faint reflection of their own movements. But then, just as Nora was about to reassure Lauren, the figure moved. A man stood in the yard, partially obscured by the branches of a tree. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, staring at the house. His features were hard to make out in the dim light, but his presence was unmistakable. "Maybe it's a neighbor," Jen said nervously, though her voice betrayed her fear. "No," Nora replied firmly. "I've never seen him before." The girls quickly turned off the lights in the living room, hoping it would make it harder for the man to see inside. They huddled together, whispering frantically as they tried to decide what to do. The break-in. Minutes passed, and the man didn't move. Then, suddenly, there was a sound, a soft but deliberate creak, as if someone was testing the front door. Nora's heart raced. She remembered her mother locking the doors before going to bed, but now she wasn't so sure. "Should we wake your mom?" Lauren asked, her voice barely audible. Before Nora could answer, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. The girls froze, their eyes wide with terror. The sound had come from the kitchen. "Hide," Nora whispered urgently, her voice filled with panic. All three scrambled to find hiding places. Nora ducked behind the couch, while Lauren and Jen squeezed into a small closet near the hallway. They tried to control their breathing, but fear and adrenaline made it almost impossible. Footsteps echoed through the house. The footsteps in the house grew louder and clearer. The silence that had once filled the rooms now felt ominous. The girls remained in their hiding spots, holding their breath, hoping the intruder would leave without finding them. But the steps kept coming closer. First contact. Nora, hiding behind the couch, caught a glimpse of a shadow moving from the kitchen into the living room. The man moved slowly, as if inspecting every detail. In his hand, he held something that looked like a metal rod or a crowbar. His breathing was audible even from where Nora was hiding. The girl clenched her fists, her heart was pounding so loudly it felt as if he might hear it. She tried to remember where she had left her phone, but to her horror, she realized it was on the coffee table in the living room, right in front of where the intruder was. The man stopped in the center of the room, looking around. His movements were abrupt, but it was clear he was searching for something, or someone. Nora's decision. Nora realized that staying in her hiding spot could be dangerous. The man could easily see her if he came closer. Slowly and silently, she began to move along the back of the couch, trying to reach the stairs leading to the second floor, where her mother was asleep. Meanwhile, in the closet where Lauren and Jen were hiding, the oppressive silence was becoming unbearable. Jen couldn't hold back and whispered. "What's he doing? Do you see him?" Lauren wanted to reply, but at that moment, their hiding spot betrayed them. A faint creak came from the closet. The man immediately turned his head toward the sound. The discovery. The man's steps became faster and heavier. He headed straight for the closet where the girls were hiding. Lauren and Jen pressed themselves against the back wall, trying to suppress their panic. The man threw the closet door open. His eyes, filled with anger, met the terrified gazes of the girls. "You two, come out," he barked, his voice sharp and loud, though not frantic. In his hand, he still held the metal rod, which he waved threateningly. Lauren and Jen, trembling, stepped out of the closet. Jen began to cry softly, while Lauren tried to calm her down. The man nodded toward the couch. "Sit down. And don't move." Nora tries to wake her mother. Meanwhile, Nora, taking advantage of the man's focus on her friends, quietly made her way to the second floor. Reaching her mother's room, she carefully opened the door. "Mom, wake up," Nora whispered, shaking Amy by the shoulders. But Amy didn't respond. The sleeping pills had taken too strong of an effect, and waking her seemed impossible. Nora felt despair creeping in. The idea of facing this intruder alone terrified her. Then she remembered her mother's phone, which was always on the nightstand. Nora quickly grabbed it, but to her horror, she saw it was dead. Returning to the first floor, Nora decided to go back downstairs to try to find her own phone or figure out a way to alert the neighbors. As she descended a few steps, she saw the man now sitting in a chair, staring intently at Lauren and Jen, who sat frozen on the couch. He was speaking to them, but his voice was low and almost monotone. "Who else is here?" he asked, scanning the room. "I saw there were 3 of you. Where's your friend?" The girls remained silent. Lauren, looking at the man, simply shook her head. The man stood up, his face darkening. He began to search the room, and Nora realized time was running out. She had to do something. Nora's distraction. Near the stairs, on a small table, was a glass candle holder. Nora grabbed it and threw it forcefully toward the kitchen. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. The man immediately turned toward the noise. "What the hell?" he growled, heading toward the kitchen, leaving Lauren and Jen alone. Nora seized the moment to run to her friends. "Quick, let's go," she whispered, pulling them toward the stairs. The girls, barely holding back tears, ran after Nora. They needed to hide or find a way to escape the house while the man was distracted in the kitchen. But they didn't yet know that their actions were only the beginning of a long and terrifying night. The investigation continues. Time passed, and the investigation into Nora's case continued. It seemed that evidence was coming together slowly, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to form a complete picture. However, in mid-November 2021, an unexpected event occurred that changed the course of the case. The suspect's arrest. On November 17, 2021, a police patrol in the nearby town of Elmwood stopped a white van for a traffic violation. The driver was a 42-year-old man named Richard Grayson. Officers immediately noticed his strange behavior. Grayson appeared tense, his hands were shaking, and sweat was visible on his forehead. The officers requested his documents and, noticing his evident nervousness, decided to search the vehicle. In the back seat, they found several items that raised their suspicions: ropes, worn-out work boots with mud on the soles, and a torn plastic bag. What caught their attention the most was a strand of brown hair tangled in one of the ropes. This was enough to arrest Grayson and take him in for questioning. The interrogation. At the station, Grayson initially adopted a defiant attitude. He denied any involvement in a crime and claimed that all the items found were just trash he collected for work. However, when officers began asking him specific questions, his version of events started to contradict itself. The police knew they didn't yet have strong evidence against him. They decided to check his alibi for the night of October 4th, when Nora disappeared. Grayson was unable to provide a clear explanation of where he had been that night, which heightened their suspicions. The first pieces of evidence. Meanwhile, forensic experts began an urgent analysis of the items found. Fibers collected from Grayson's boots matched the fibers from the carpet in the West family's living room. Additionally, the hair found on the rope shared the same characteristics as Nora's. Investigators also compared the footprints left near the window through which the intruder likely entered with the soles of Grayson's boots. The match was exact. New witnesses. At the same time, police began searching for witnesses who could link Grayson to the Kingsville area on the night of Nora's disappearance. They found a gas station equipped with surveillance cameras. The footage showed a white van, similar to Grayson's, near the West family's home just hours before the abduction. A resident of Kingsville recalled seeing the van several times during the week leading up to the incident. According to him, the driver acted suspiciously, driving slowly through the streets and carefully observing the houses. The confession. Under the pressure of mounting evidence, Grayson began to crack. After 3 days of interrogations, on November 20th, he made his first confession. He admitted that on the night of October 5th, he entered the West family's home after seeing lights on and shadows moving inside. According to Grayson, he acted on impulse, but the situation quickly got out of control. He refused to give details about what happened to Nora or disclose her whereabouts. His answers were evasive, and police suspected he was hiding additional information or protecting someone else. A turning point. At this stage, investigators concluded that Grayson was undoubtedly involved in Nora's disappearance. However, without a full confession or indications of her whereabouts, the case remained unresolved. On November 21st, police organized a search in a wooded area near Elmwood, where Grayson had allegedly disposed of his things. This moment became the turning point in the investigation, which would change everything. After Nora's disappearance. When police arrived at the scene on the night of October 4, 2021, they found a broken kitchen window, overturned furniture in the living room, and signs of a struggle. Nora was not in the house. Her friends, Lauren and Jen, were found inside, in a state of shock. Both were crying and barely able to speak, but after several hours of questioning, they managed to explain what had happened. Lauren and Jen's testimony. According to the girls, the intruder had discovered them, but by that time, Nora had already tried to escape from the house. The man threatened them, forcing them to sit on the couch. Then, upon hearing a noise in the kitchen, where Nora had tried to distract him, he ran after her. Lauren recalled hearing Nora's screams from the kitchen, followed by a loud thud and the sound of footsteps leaving the house. Both girls saw the man dragging Nora out through the back door. "He just grabbed her like she was a toy," Jen said through sobs. "We didn't know what to do. We just stayed still, too scared to move." The search for Nora. Police launched an immediate search and declared the case a high priority. A large-scale operation was organized, involving local residents, volunteers, and canine units. Within the first 24 hours, boot prints leading into a nearby forest were found, along with some scraps of fabric that were later identified as part of Nora's pajamas. However, the trail quickly went cold. It seemed the man knew how to cover his tracks. Richard Grayson and subsequent events. When police detained Richard Grayson in November 2021, they linked him to Nora's disappearance through several pieces of evidence, matching boot prints, fabric fibers from the West family's home, and witness accounts of a white van seen near the house on the night of the abduction. Under pressure from the evidence, Grayson confessed to abducting Nora. However, he refused to provide details about her whereabouts, claiming he did not remember what had happened after that night. The discovery of Nora. After intense days of searching, on November 24, 2021, police found Nora. She was in a wooded area about 20 kilometers from her home. Nora was located in an old hunting cabin, tied up but alive. She was extremely malnourished, terrified, and barely able to speak. Doctors determined that she had spent almost 3 weeks in the cabin. Grayson had occasionally visited the location, but fortunately, he had not caused her severe physical harm. The aftermath. Nora was immediately taken to the hospital, where she was finally reunited with her mother and sister. Psychologists began working with her to help her recover from the trauma. Lauren and Jen also received professional support, as they struggled with guilt for not being able to prevent their friend's abduction. Grayson was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and life-threatening threats. His case became one of the most closely followed in the region, with the public paying close attention to every stage of the trial. Nora's future. Despite the harrowing experience, Nora found the strength to recover and return to her life. Her story became a symbol of resilience, and her family continued to advocate for stronger safety measures for children in Kingsville. Several months had passed since Nora was rescued from the old hunting cabin. Her return home was met with tears of joy, hugs, and unwavering support from her loved ones. However, the West family understood that they faced a long journey to help Nora return to a normal life. The path to recovery. At first, Nora was withdrawn and barely spoke. She often woke up in the middle of the night from nightmares, clutching tightly to the teddy bear her sister Sarah had given her. Despite this, Amy and Sarah were always by her side, surrounding her with love and care. The psychologists working with Nora noted that, while her trauma was deep, she had a strong inner resilience. With great effort, she slowly began to share what she had experienced in the cabin. Richard Grayson had kept her isolated, but fortunately, she managed to hold on to hope and faith that she would be found. Nora returned to her studies gradually, initially receiving individual lessons at home. Her friends Lauren and Jen also provided her with tremendous support. The girls were able to overcome their feelings of guilt after understanding that they could not have prevented the abduction. Together, they began to create a new, safe space to share and rebuild their friendship. The trial and justice. In March 2022, Richard Grayson was brought to trial. Despite her fear, Nora agreed to testify. Her words were crucial in securing the harshest sentence. Grayson was found guilty of all charges: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and threats to life. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the West family, this moment brought relief. Despite the nightmare they had endured, they felt that justice had finally been served. A new beginning. After the trial, Nora began to interact more with the people around her. She returned to her hobbies, theater and drawing. Together with her mother and sister, she organized a small exhibition of her drawings, dedicated to her family and friends who had helped her through the difficult times. The West family also became involved in community initiatives. They joined a campaign to strengthen child safety in schools and neighborhoods. Amy often spoke at meetings, sharing her story and offering advice on how to prevent similar tragedies. Nora today. A year later, Nora was smiling again. She continued to pursue her dreams, participating in school plays, preparing for a young artists competition, and beginning to write a story about a girl who overcame her fears and found her inner strength. Nora's story became a symbol not only of her resilience but also of the power of family support, friendship, and a united community. Despite everything she had endured, Nora proved that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found, and a future full of light and possibilities can be built.